Dobro jutro. Ja sam Gordana Matić. Čulo sam da su ovdje najbolji čevosi u gradu, pa...
Ja sam lano mislio da ti preuzmeš radnju.
Da se nemoj se ljutiti, ali nisam magistrirala da pečem kebab.
Samo da pozdravim velikog maga. Kako je Halde?
Kako se ne se? Je dobro?
E pa sada mi konačno mogu reći koji su najbolji čevosi u Sarajevu. Čevabđenica Mula Hadžić smještena u zanosno okruženje takše sokaka, pravi biser ovog grada.
Šta je? Nemate pametnijeg posla? Pa i nemam.
Gledaj, 30.000 pregleda.
Fino.
Šef je ludilo totalno.
Ma sjajno.
A što ona ima da dolazi nama ovdje iz Zagreba i govori koji su ćevapi najbolji? Treba mi da sjednemo i odlučimo koji su najbolji.
Jel?
Rekli su da si me tražio, prosti, ne stižem.
Uđeš mi ratu, Enis.
Okej, donio ću ponedjeljak.
Aj, siguran.
Ej, čekaj. Ej, sranje.
I kod mene je.
Kontuo sam da napravimo takmičenje, a? Skupimo pravi sarajevski žiri i nek oni odlučuje čiji ćevapi bolji.
Evo tvoji su bolje, ne moramo se takmičiti.
Moramo. I da stavimo na internet.
Just like to invite Izudin to the stage and Chris Leslie, the director of Lockdown, to come join us.
Please welcome our guests to the stage. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and I want to welcome you on my behalf as well. You can go here. My name is Dijana Jelača, and I'm a co-programmer of the Bosnian Film Festival, and this is my fellow programmer, Amir Husak.
Yes, hi, good evening. Welcome, everyone. My name is Amir. Diana and I have been co-programmers of this festival for a very long time now, for years, and it's kind of exciting and at the same time terrifying to be back in the theater after, 3 years. We're very excited and thank you for coming out to this opening. And I'm just gonna, without further ado, I'm just gonna go. There's a lot to say, as Damir, the director of the festival, has said earlier. So many trials and tribulations, and they're still going on. But I don't want to get into it now, and I'm sure we'll get to it in our Q&A. I want to go ahead and introduce our esteemed guests. Next to me is Izudin Bajrovic, or Izo, as you going from the just he's one of the most prominent and prolific Bosnian theater and film actors. And when I say prolific, he is in 5. We just realized he's in 5 of the films at this festival. At just this year's festival.
Already an MVP.
Already. So he has played a number of roles in films and plays in Bosnia-Herzegovina and abroad, and for time worked as a professor at the Academy of Performing Arts in Sarajevo. Since July 2018, he became, he's been acting director of the National Theatre of Sarajevo as well. Aside from a very long list of theatre plays, his film roles include the remake Burning Fire at Uncle Idris, The Living and the Dead, The Warriors, Halima's Way, Death in Sarajevo, Not So Friendly Neighborhood Affair, which we saw, The Dark Room, and many, many others. His TV roles include The Wounded, A Visa for the Future, The Black Chronicle, and the critically acclaimed Croatian series Newspaper. Welcome, Izo.
Thank you very much.
Next, I want to introduce all the way to our left, Chris Leslie, who's an award-winning photographer and filmmaker. He has documented stories across Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and around the world, as well as in his home city of Glasgow, Scotland. His best-selling book, Disappearing Glasgow, documents the changing face of Glasgow and has seen him acknowledged as the most consistent chronicler of the city's recent history. His first feature-length documentary, Finding Family, which we also have actually shown here at the Bosnian Film Festival in New York, was awarded 2 Scottish awards, BFTA's awards, in the New Talent Stand, as well as 2 Golden Apple Awards here at the Bosnian Film Festival in New York in 2014. The film was also shown around the world and has been broadcast by Al Jazeera. Welcome, Chris. So great to have you here.
I guess I can get us started. I just also want to say thank you all for being here. It means the world. This is our first in-person festival since 2019. It is an experiment that we continue to participate in, and we're delighted to be back and have you all back in person. And thank you also for supporting us during the times of the pandemic when we were virtual. We're still in a pandemic, so let's keep that in mind. And speaking of which, both of these films address this. I was reading recently an assessment more broadly of film industry that films so far, apparently, not just Bosnian films or Bosnian themed films, haven't really addressed the pandemic as much. I take a little bit of an issue with that assertion, but definitely both of these films do address the pandemic. So maybe, Chris, we start with you. Tell us about the process of coming up with this incredible juxtaposition that you created in your short film in such an incredibly effective way.
Yeah, I mean, I think like most people when lockdown hit as a photographer, filmmaker, I was homeschooling my children. Well, I was more of a classroom assistant. I'm not a good teacher. But yeah, it was just a really bizarre time and still is. But where I live in the city, we had an hour of exercise. So this kind of curfew thing, and I could take my kids out for an hour. And the closest, I live really close to the city, and the city centre was the place that I took them because it was the quietest. There was no one in the streets. There was nothing. And I just thought, we'll never see this city like this again. So I just started capturing the footage and capturing it as many ways as I could, because I just knew I had to kind of capture it, because it wouldn't happen again. But the kind of connection with Sarajevo was that I think it started to become a bit cliched, seeing empty cities, and I wanted in some way to kind of make a comparison, because it was like any other Western city, there was a siege mentality going on, and I just wanted to make that connection with audiences, and just tell a different story, if you like.
And that's how the connection with the testimonial that we hear of the voiceover from a first-person account of the siege of Sarajevo came together. Because I have to tell you, and I know I speak for a lot of people, that the beginning of the pandemic also felt like flashbacks to the beginning of the war. How did you come about this testimonial and deciding to put it together with the footage?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Sarajevo since '96, so I've got a lot of knowledge about the city and a lot of friends in the city. And first off, to set the record straight, that there is very different things going on in the siege of Sarajevo, and the human suffering during the siege and the whole war in Bosnia can't be summarised. So I had to be very careful about how I would kind of approach that. But it wasn't really my story. I sent the script and I spoke to people, my friends in the city, and there was differences, but there were obvious similarities as well. And I kind of sent this paper script out, spoke to people, and then worked with Shemso Edin to kind of come up with the final voiceover. But even at the last minute, even when Samir, the sound guy, came in, he said he can't really say that because his experience of the siege was different. And everybody who I spoke to, all friends are my age, I'm 48, so everyone who I spoke to all had memories of the siege. They were young people at the time, but they could remember both times, and that was important to me to speak to them and to try and get that right, and not upset anyone in any ways,
And Izo, I'll turn to you now, and then I'll turn it over to Amir, but maybe you'll understand my question. We'll do a little bit of translation here, but clearly pandemic is permeating your film as well.
I didn't listen you. Your question. Sorry, I didn't.
We're talking about the pandemic and making movies.
For me.
Making movies during the pandemic. It's not the main theme of your film, but clearly it was made during the pandemic. You tell us a little bit about that process.
I know. Excuse me, my Bosnian is much better than my English, and because of that, I'll speak in Bosnian, and the translator will help me. Prvo, nije na isti način pandemija uticala na razvoj stvari u Bosni i u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama.
First, the pandemic did not have the same effect in Bosnia-Herzegovina as it did in the United States.
Naši teatri nisu bili zatvoreni 2-3 godine, mi smo bili zatvoreni prvih par mjeseci i nakon toga smo pokušavali i radili sa prekidima pravili smo neke veleslalome između tih valova pandemije, ali ne može se reći o potpunoj obustavi kakva se dešavala u zemljama zapada.
Our theaters didn't really close the first 2-3 months, so we would kind of reopen and go back to it off and on, and we kind of navigated through this time, but we did not have a type of a lockdown that you saw here.
Dakle, kao što smo vidjeli u filmu Deset, pola, mi nismo pandemiju iskoristili da ne bi ništa radili, nego da nam ona da neki razlog, odnosno motiv da napravimo nešto što se tiče pandemije gdje radimo. Malo je napravljeno filmova, ja mislim uopšte na svijetu, koji se dešavaju u doba pandemije, gdje se koriste maske, gdje se pandemija uvažava kao činjenica. Mi smo uvažili pandemiju kao činjenicu, ali nismo nekako dopustili da nas potpuno blokira.
As you can see, actually, in the film, the pandemic actually didn't stop us from making films, but in a sense became a part of the story. We took it and we accepted it as a fact and integrated it into our work, basically.
Tako da, mislim, uticala je naravno kao i svuda na svijetu, ali nije potpuno paralizovala život, zbog čega mi je na neki način drago, iako mi sada govorimo o pandemiji kao da je ona prošlost, a ona još uvijek nije stvar prošlosti. Ja sam prebolovao prije nepunih mjesec dana.
So I'm glad that it didn't affect us and really stop us in a way that it did maybe at other places. But at the same time, also we're talking about it as if it has passed, but it hasn't. And I also feel differently now that I've actually had it just a month ago, COVID. I want to ask you, Izudine, isto ću te upitati u vezi filma, jel me možeš malo dočarati generalno kako je bilo ponovo raditi na setu u to doba? Znači, kao što si rekao, radilo se dosta u tom periodu, više možda nego u nekim drugim mjestima, a ti si bio u dosta filmova u zadnje vrijeme. Da li si primijetio možda regionalne razlike što se tiče toga? Ti si također igrao u Hrvatskoj i u drugim republikama regiona, tako reći. Jel možeš malo nam reći o tim iskustvima? Da li ima tu razlike?
Do you want me to translate the question?
No.
Sure. The question is about, tell us more about whether you've noticed any differences in working in film lately, as of late. I assume during the pandemic, because Izo is an incredibly prolific actor, as we mentioned already, working in regional cinema, not just in Bosnia, but Croatia in more broadly. So whether there were any noticeable differences in working in film in this last period.
Da, ja mogu reći da sam ja bio praktično aktivan sve vrijeme, te 2 godine koliko je trajala ta kriza, i radio sam, mislim da je prvi projekt koji sam radio u vrijeme pandemije bila jedna serija koju smo radili u Beogradu. Nakon toga sam radio seriju u Zagrebu, onda smo radili film Deset, pola u Sarajevu i
I can say that I've been very lucky to continue working during these past years during the pandemic. First I was working on a TV series and then started working on the film that we just saw, Not So Friendly Neighborhood Affair.
I nisam primijetio neke velike razlike vezano za odnos prema radu u vremenu pandemije. Svi smo nekako trudili se da radimo, da se pridržavamo svih onih neophodnih mjera koje se morale pridržavati, strahujući od toga da virus ne uđe na set, da ne uđe među ekipu. Dešavalo se da se zaustavi snimanje na 10-15 dana, jer nije se moglo potpuno izbjeći, ali nekako svi su se trudili, svi u čitavom tom regionu da ipak ne posustanu do kraja, da ono što se započne uz sve poteškoće se i dovrši do kraja, i tako je bilo. Mislim, nisam primijetio neku veliku razliku. Jedina razlika je što se u Bosni radi manje nego u drugim zemljama regiona.
I think most of you understood that. I'll translate still. I didn't notice that many differences in the work. Of course, there were concerns regarding the pandemic, concerns, protocols, preventing the virus, hoping to prevent the virus from entering the set, occasional shutdown of the set, and filming for 10 or 14 days. But other than that, it continued to be work that was being done, having also acknowledging the fact that there is less work done in Bosnia as a film and TV industry than in other parts of the region or the world.
I'm going to ask Chris something you mentioned earlier as we kind of chatted in front of a theater earlier, that you also ran into some difficulties while making this film. It's very strange and kind of ghostly to see Glasgow. I've been in Glasgow once, and it was really like 7 or 8 years ago. Remember, it was as kind of a vibrant place, but then seeing it like that is sort of kind of unbelievable. But you mentioned that you also ran into some troubles while actually shooting or collecting this footage. And could you speak a little bit about your experiences or difficulties making films during the pandemic?
It depends who's in the audience. If there's no one from Police Scotland, then I'll be okay.
Please raise your hand if you work for the police.
No, yeah. Again, even before I had the idea of doing something about Sarajevo, I knew I had a window to capture this footage. And I have a license, a pilot's license to fly a drone. And there was a few drone shots in the city. But as I was doing them, the police, there was a no-fly zone over the city because one of the big stadiums, conference centres in the city was being used as a hospital, or was about to be used as a hospital. And I kind of knew that, and I should have known that. You're supposed to read all these things before you fly a drone, but it's very boring. But I guess I just couldn't believe it. In the end, no one was administered into this hospital, but even the police were in such high alert. And they made me land the drone and asked me if I had taken COVID precautions with the drone. And I said, what is that? And they said, well, it should be wiped down with antiseptics, because if it falls out the skies, this is serious. He said someone could run up and pick it up and you've sneezed all over it. And I was just like, what? Yeah, yes, officer, really, really sorry, officer. I've got 4 kids in the house, I'm freelance, I have to capture this footage because I'm doing something for the Guardian newspaper. I'm pitching this story, which I was, and they contacted the Guardian newspaper as well, and just to check me out. So it was all a bit, and my wife wasn't happy at all, really, because I had no story, I had no money to make the film, but I just captured everything first. But it was just it was a reflection on the times, a disbelief that there's a no-fly zone over the city because they're expecting tens of thousands of people from all over Scotland to be flown into this hospital. You know, there was just so much to deal with that I just put it in the back of my head and just zoom, send the drone up and worry about it later. And also just the reaction of the police, which was just a bit daft, really. But that was how they were dealing with things as well, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was translating some of this to Izo with regards to the protocols, because we see some protocols in your film with the constant spraying of various objects. That's very important. I have a confession to make. I'm a vegetarian. I don't think I'm the target audience necessarily, or maybe I am. You tell me. Tell us about the love of food. And I know that we have people who recognize this incredible food culture of Sarajevo and Bosnia in the film, and how it is conveyed in this deeply, even if one doesn't eat cevapi, let's put it this way, it is endearing and relatable and humorous and lighthearted. Tell us more about it.
Yes. No, Sarajevo je nekako sinonim za ćevape, burek i humor.
There was a synonym for cevapi, burek, and humor.
Yes, and in this film we have ćevape and humor. Yes. Sad smo snimili jednu seriju o bureku, pa da zaokružimo.
We just made a series about burek, so just to make...
And just to clarify, when you say burek, are you saying cheese, meat, etc., or burek is... I'm asking, I come from a different part of Bosnia.
That's provocation. Burek is only one. Yes, of course. But our series, its title is Burek with cheese. Of course, it's impossible.
That's what I'm talking about.
That doesn't exist.
What do you mean?
Ne, naravno, mi pokušavamo uporno da još nešto dodamo tom prepoznavanju Sarajeva, da ne bude samo burek i ćevapi i humor, nego da bude recimo nešto i kao kultura i nešto filmografija, ali džaba, ovi što dolaze sa strane su uporne i teško. Znaju samo za želju, ali ne za klub, nego za ćevapdžinicu.
So we're working hard to actually change this, that we're just not known by cevapi and burek and so on, but by other things.
Da, od duše i po ratu smo prepoznatljivi.
And they know us, of course, because of war.
I potom nas pamte. Ali u svakom slučaju, pa lijepo da nas po nečemu prepoznaju, pa makar po ćevapima. Ali evo, nije problem što ste vegetarijanac, odnosno vegetarijanka, evo i mala Lana je vegetarijanka, ali to je ne spriječava da bude vlasnica ćevapdžinice.
It's not a problem that you're vegetarian, because as you can see, Lana is actually a vegetarian, but also owns a cevapi shop.
Seems she has a lot of promise running that business. The future is with her. Budućnost je njena, kažem.
Lanina?
Da.
Wait, when we're speaking about Lana, there are these young actors. Kad govorimo već o Lani, imamo dosta mladih glumaca. Možeš nam malo reći o tvojom iskustvu rada sa mlađim glumcima, znači s mlađom generacijom s kojom u zadnje vrijeme, ja bih rekao, isto češće radiš?
So I'm just to translate the question, since there's a lot of younger actors in the film, can you tell us more about your experience of working with younger actors, because you have been working with them a lot lately?
Da, naravno, postoje izuzetno talentovani mladi ljudi, glumci iz drugih oblasti što se tiče umjetnosti, ali evo sada govorimo o glumicama i glumcima, postoji izuzetno talentovani i brojni mladi ljudi koji nažalost nemaju dovoljno šanse da pokažu svoj talent, da ga realizuju, jer je produkcija u Bosni i Hercegovini izuzetno mala. Ove godine se stvari malo pomjeraju, ali to je vrlo malo. Za recimo razliku od Beograda, odnosno Srbije, gdje se u svakom trenutku snima 20-ak serija igranih, kod nas se snimi jedna u 5 godina ili nijedna, i sada je nešto BH Telekom krenuo u neku priču, pa malo se ta priča počela razvijati, vidjet ćemo kako će se nastaviti, ali izuzetno je meni teško lično kao glumcu koji je već negdje haman pred kraj svoje karijere glumačke, da gledam mlade ljude koji su završili glumu, za koje znam da su izuzetno talentovani, koji rade kao konobari u kafanama. Možda to u Americi nije tako čudno, ali druga je priča, koji moraju, ne mogu dobiti nikakav angažman, nikakvo zaposlenje, pa moraju da rade neke druge poslove za koje nisu obučeni. Mislim da država, mi kad govorimo o velikom broju mladih ljudi...
Let me know which part I missed. These are all very important points. there are indeed a lot of incredibly talented young actors and actresses in Bosnia, and Bosnia is by default an incredibly small film industry. And so they don't get that many chances to act and get work. Just a nearby comparison would be Serbia, where there's a lot more production happening, 20 series being filmed as opposed to one TV series in Bosnia. So quite often they need to turn to other types of work like waitering, and this is where the state may be failing. And I think you were suggesting that this might be unusual here, and we might counter to say it's not that unusual. Struggling actors waitering quite a bit. It is a different kind of system coming from, but overall I am saddened by the fact that they don't get as much work and support to work in their own profession. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, no, you.
Da, i samo da završim, znači mislim da jednostavno država još uvijek nema sluha da prepozna vrijednosti, značaj kulture uopšte, jeli, za gradnju identiteta jednog društva, jedne države. Ajmo se nadati da će se to u jednom trenutku s nekim novim generacijama i popraviti.
And all in all, the country and the state, the government still doesn't give enough recognition to the importance of the work of artists, actors in particular in this case. And one can only hope that this will improve in the future.
I'm going to jump back quickly to Chris, just to kind of speaking about Bosnia now, and you have a really a long relationship with Bosnia-Herzegovina, traveling and working there. You also have a project currently happening called A Balkan Journey. Can you tell us about how this really came about, how your interest actually grew in the region, and how you kind of returned after working with Ogi and after this documentation and photography that you've been doing, how you decided again that even this film that is about a pandemic somehow brought in Sarajevo and Bosnia again into the narrative or the narrative fabric?
I've had a long history with Bosnia, with Sarajevo in particular. So 96 was the first time I was there. 97, 98, 99. I went and taught kids photography, set up a dark room and had a project called Sarajevo Camera Kids. And that's what I'd done for the first kind of 3 years since graduating. So to be honest, it was escapism for me, because I graduated in social sciences, which is a degree that you can do if you don't know what you want to do when you grow up. I highly recommend it. And I just all my whole formative years were spent between Glasgow and Sarajevo. So Sarajevo was very important to me as well. And going back to this film, again, I wanted to, the original film, we have a Bosnian language edit, but the original film, Shemso was speaking in English. And the purpose of the film was to make a connection between Glasgow and Sarajevo, because people watch it and they presume that Shemso, Simsalvin, is talking about COVID and the lockdown and all these kind of things. And I just, to me, it was that one opportunity where, two cities really close to me had that shared experience, had that shared humanity. And that'll never happen again, because I've always wondered, why certain places seem to undergo horrific transformations and horrific wars, etc. And we always seem to be very blessed and somehow managed to escape that. That's fucking on its head now with Ukraine, unfortunately. But it was that time to bring both cities together. And that was important to me. And the money I got for this film, I got a small pocket of money, and it was actually they awarded 4 artists this residency, if you like, to create something, and it was their personal response to the pandemic, and it was across all art forms, and this was what I submitted, and I thought I'll never get it because it's about a city, but they were like, no, it was such a strong application, so they knew the connection was there, and that was the connection that I wanted to make people think about other cities that have went through sieges, other cities that are currently going through sieges, and just that one time, you know, the pandemic's still here, but in many ways it's not here. You know, particularly we've got more freedoms now in the UK, but we have a bonkers Trump-like Prime Minister just now. But that time, at that point, that was the one time I thought, this is a real moment here where everyone is connected, you know, and that was the point of it. Sorry, I went off on a
No.
tangent.
Thank you.
I think before we open it up for the audience, and we do want to hear from you, and someone should be taking mics around, so please line up and raise your hand if you have a question. We have already established that you have been in so many films, short films, feature-length films, not just in this year's festival, over the years, but this is not the first time you've worked with Danis Tanović. So I wanted to ask you in particular about working with him, your experience of working with him. Tell us more about that.
Prvi put sa Danisom sam radio film Cirkus Kolumbija, imao sam jednu scenu i muštro me 2 sata.
First time I worked with Danis,
znam li ja glumiti.
Yeah, it was in Circus Columbia, and I had only one scene, and he was totally driving me crazy and asking me whether I even knew how to act.
I onda je valjda skonto da nešto znam.
And he understood that I actually know how to act.
Pa mi je u sljedećem filmu dao glavnu ulogu, to je bio film Smrt u Sarajevu.
Then in the next film, they gave me the main role.
And
in
we
the film,
had an amazing screening here. We missed you. Danis was here. Sold out. We talked about you the entire time.
I o tebi smo pričali.
Mogu misliti.
Yeah, right.
Da, onda nakon toga smo evo snimili i Deset pola i još nakon toga smo snimali seriju koja još nije izašla, ali je završena Kotlina. Nažalost, tada se desila ta nesreća ili sa Danisovim sinom, pa je Danis na kraju morao prekinuti, ali evo, hvala Bogu, izgleda se sve to dobro razvija i da će mali Orhan biti dobro, što mu od srca želim. Tako da saradnja Danisa i Tanovića između njega i mene traje već, sad ne znam tačno kad je bilo ta prva, već je to dugi niz godina.
More than a decade.
I moram da kažem da bez obzira što nije tu, mislim sve najbolje o njemu kao reditelju, pa onda i kao čovjeku, a kao roditelju, jeli da ne govorim.
We've been working together for a long time, so after that in Sarajevo we've done a Not So Friendly Neighborhood Affair, and even after that we've been working on the series that is not out yet, and we also had to interrupt our work, stop our work on the series because of an accident that Danis' son had. It was a car accident, but he's recovering now, his son Orhan. It's interesting now, I just realized that also the character here in the film is named Orhan, and he's recovering, and we're actually returning back and working together again, and I really appreciate my relationship with him as a director and actor.
Let's join all together in wishing the best for the recovery of Danis' son. And with that, let's open it up to the audience. What do you think?
Let's open it up to the audience. So
questions.
Raise your hand and
don't be shy. It's been 3 years.
It's been 3 years. I've lost all my social cues. I don't know where to stand, how to act. So
social skills.
Social skills, exactly.
Yes, we have a hand up over there.
Over there.
I wouldn't take the quietness of the audience as a lack of interest in any way. I know myself, I frequently do ask questions, but this movie left me with no questions. I found it a beautiful thing to watch and observe. I found it funny and compelling at the same time. I thought the acting was superb, and I enjoyed it very, very much. And that sort of leaves you just in this relaxed sense of joy, of experiencing what movies can do. And to see, I have some Scot blood in me myself. And I come from a kind of rough town in New Jersey. And when I see people in Sarajevo, they don't seem strange to me. They remind me very much of my own childhood in New Jersey and the United States. Always, it seems. So I just want to make it clear. I think it's hard to have a question when you simply feel like you just had a moment of, I could call theatrical beauty, that I know I am just sitting in it and like being in a warm pool and feeling good.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Ja samo želim da kažem da ovaj film ja nazivam bajkom o Sarajevu. Inače, volim ga nazvati bajka o Sarajevu zato što su ljudi mnogo bolji u filmu nego što stvarno jesu.
I don't call this film a fairy tale for Sarajevo because the people in the film are much better than they're actually in a real life. Imamo li još pitanja? Are there any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you think that the region, the Balkan region, is opening up a little bit, and various countries within the region are working together a little more, and that film is kind of connecting the people as well, kind of healing some wounds, or is it my imagination?
Ako dobro razumijem pitanje,
If I understand correctly.
mislim da veze između zemalja, da ih sad tako nazovemo, Balkana, jel, u nekim segmentima nikada nisu ni prekinute.
The connections between a lot of these countries in the region have never even stopped existing.
Prije svega mislim jel, na odnose među ljudima, na kulturnu saradnju.
I'm referring to connections between the people, culture.
Saradnja u kriminalu nije nikad ni prestajala.
Collaboration in crime activities have never really stopped. And it's even stronger now.
Ali sve dok, moje mišljenje jeste da sve dok su ove strukture vlasti na vlasti.
My opinion is while these structures kind of hold power,
koje žive od nacionalizma i mržnje koju nacionalizam
who live of
proizvodi,
nationalism and hate that nationalism actually produces,
mi se ne možemo nadati potpunom otvaranju Balkana, odnosno zemalja Balkana, odnosno zapadnog Balkana, kako se to uže naziva, potpunom otvaranju i nekom uspostavljanju neke, kako bi se to nazvalo, mirne kolaboracije, odnosno vraćanja nekog zajedništva koje je postojalo.
We can't really expect, as long as they remain in power, we cannot really expect that kind of a full opening, collaborations working across these lines of division that they've sowed, I guess.
Još uvijek su na vlasti upravo one snage koje jesu počele rat na tim prostorima.
Those who are in the power are the same ones who have actually started the war in those
I sve dok su te političke opcije na vlasti, mi ne možemo očekivati da one promijene ćud. Ne možemo očekivati neke radikalna poboljšanja.
As long as that's the only political option, we cannot expect radical improvements.
We have another question right there.
Hi. First I want to say the film was excellent. Ovo pitanje za Izu. Ja mislim publika hoće da zna čiji su ćevapi onda bili najbolji.
The audience would like to know
whose ćevapi were indeed the best ones.
Kad sam pročitao scenarij, ja sam se pitao gdje je odgovor?
When I read the script, I asked myself, where is the answer?
U Sarajevu su najbolji ćevapi.
In Sarajevo. The best ones are in Sarajevo.
Sad bi se ovi iz Travnika bunili, nije tačno kod nas. A onda ovi iz Tuzle, a nije tačno, naši su najbolji.
The Travnik people clamored up, and also Tuzla.
Novi Pazar.
Novi Pazar, etc. There's a lot of contenders.
Imaš li ti svoje omiljene u Sarajevu? Je li to tajna? Smijemo li to pitati? Je li ćeš smjeti vratiti kuću ako pitamo to? Ako kažem.
Ne bi se smio,
smio
bi se vratiti kuće, ali ne bi više smio ući, recimo kod Hodžića, pa ne bi više smio ući kod Ferhatovića, ne bi više smio ući u puno kebabdžinica. Imam jednu omiljenu, ali ne smijem reći.
He can tell us what his favorite Sarajevo kebab here because he will not be welcome back to the city anymore. I think we have another question somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, there was.
Hi. So, to echo what everyone else said, both films were fantastic. One thing, or one of the things that I find most powerful about film, as well as music, is the use of tone. So, not just the words that are said, but the gentleness in the voice, the harshness in the voice, the speed at which is communicated, as well as the use of silence when nothing is being said, and how that can hold weight and communicate a lot in itself. So for the lockdown, my question is, how do you direct an actor when there is no action on film? There's very little movement, right? It's just an empty landscape. How do you help direct them and draw out that power in their voice? And then for the not so friendly neighborhood affair, if I'm correct, there was a lot of use of silence or pauses and just letting something sit with your character. How did you create that? Is that something that was communicated in the story of the character from the director or from the writer? Is that something that you saw when you read the script, and how did that come about?
Thank you for your questions. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, this is all done during lockdown, of course, so I dialed in while Shemso was doing the sound recording with Samir, but there was no real direction, to be honest, for me. I just knew Shemso was a friend, and I knew his story, and we'd worked together, so I knew he could get what I was trying to get as well, so there was no real strong direction from me. I probably just asked him to sound Bosnian and made sure he smoked about 40 drina per hour, but he does that anyway because he's such a husky Bosnian voice. But no, there was nothing. It was quite a simple process, and dialing in and just spending that kind of day with him in the studio remotely, which everyone's doing now anyway, you know. So I don't think it would have made any difference if I was there in person trying to. Because it was his story in many ways as well, so it didn't need much direction from me. Yeah.
Izo, you got the question, yeah?
Ja nisam siguran da znam odgovor na to pitanje.
I'm not sure I know the answer to that question.
Ja sam u filmu samo glumac i posmatram film dok ga radim samo kroz svoju ulogu, stvaram svoju ulogu.
I'm an actor. I'm just an actor, and when I look at the film, I'm just looking at it through my role in it.
Cijelinu stvara neko drugi, dakle to su reditelj, montažer.
The whole was made by the director, the editor.
I ona cijelina koju ste vi vidjeli, koju inače mi kao publika vidimo, zavisi od puno faktora. I evo u ovom slučaju, da se ne pravim pametan, prvo drago mi je da je film ostavio lijep utisak, a kako je do toga došlo i zašto je to tako, ja to zaista. I ko je zaslužan za to, ja to baš ne znam, ja znam samo ono što se tiče moje uloge.
So there are many factors that go into that, and I'm glad that the film was liked. But I always, I don't exactly know how it became that. I'm just so focused on my role usually.
I za glumce važi ono da nisu nešto pretjerano pametni. Pa da ne kvarim tu legendu.
And it goes for actors that they're not necessarily very smart. So that
don't want to spoil the myth, but I do want to, if there's no other questions, I have to ask about your banter and your dynamics with Branko Đurić Đuro and the incredible chemistry that the two of you have. It seemed very almost improvised. Was it scripted? Most of it? Were you improvising at all?
Ono što je zanimljivo u stvari u ovom čitavom scenariju jeste to da Danis kao ko-scenarista, nije jedini scenarista, ali je ko-scenarista, je imao u glavi upravo Branka Đurića i mene kada je pisao te uloge. Dakle, on je pisao uloge za poznate glumce.
What's interesting about this, that when Danis was writing this, he was also co-writing this film, he actually had me and Juro in his head when he was actually writing this.
Nekako on je radio i sa Đurom i sa mnom. Poznavao nas je i kao ličnost i kao glumce nas jako dobro poznaje i znao je tačno šta hoće od jednog i šta hoće od drugog.
He knew us both personally and as actors, and he knew exactly what he would want from us individually.
A Đuri i meni je bilo prvi put da radimo skupa. I, dakle, dvije potpuno različite energije, dva potpuno različita glumačka habitusa je Danis stavio u jednu kombinaciju koja je onako na prvu možda malo i neočekivana.
But this is the first time that Juro and I were actually acting together. Two kind of different, very different energies, different schools of acting.
Nije bilo improvizacija, dakle radili smo po onome što je bilo napisano u scenariju i kroz film smo se nas dvojica kao partneri upoznavali. I čini mi se da smo došli u jednom trenutku do toga da se prepoznamo i kao glumci i kao ljudi.
So there was no improvisation, actually. We just followed the script, and through that we also kind of grew closer also and got to know each other much better.
And recognize each other as people. I think that's a beautiful note, and that really shines through, in my humble opinion, and I'm pretty sure the audience would agree with that assessment. Are there any final questions before we wrap up our day one? I see a hand up.
Here.
So my question's really simple. It's for Chris. At being someone from Bosnia, I'm always very interested what makes people who aren't Bosnian, interested in my country. You mentioned you spent your formative years there. What kept the connection? What kept you coming back? That kind of intrigues me, so I'd like to know.
How long have you got? Yeah, I think just at that age, you formulate a lot of relationships with people. I mean, I also, from an academic perspective, I wrote my thesis on former Yugoslavia and psychology behind nationalism, etc. And the Western myth that was peddled to everyone during the war, and particularly in the UK, was that you Bosnians were all a bit mental and savage, and this was a war in a people that had these ancient Balkan hatreds, and so it was an armchair industry for me reading about things, and I knew I had to experience on the ground and meet people. I spent time volunteering in a small town in Croatia called Pakrac in Western Slavonia, which was divided between the Serbs and the Croats after the war. And that led to Sarajevo and just led to a love for the country and a love for the people. I think there's, coming from Scotland and coming from a working class background in Glasgow, that there's a dark humour, I think, that's shared amongst Bosnians and Scots as well. I think we can kind of get each other quite well. Just a quick story. I had my stag weekend, just a stag weekend when you get married and all the guys go away to normally Berlin or Amsterdam. But I took 10 of my Scottish friends to Bosnia, to Sarajevo. This was 2006. And there was just an immediate connection with all my friends in Sarajevo and all my friends in Scotland, and a lot of beers drank and slagging off each other's mothers and their shoes. And I thought you couldn't go to Germany and have the same connection with people, So to me, I think that dark humour and that kind of connection and realism kind of works really well across both cultures for me.
And tiny bit of it being also the fault of studying social sciences.
That as well, yeah. It gives you a lot of time to experience the world. I mean, in those early days, I was working in a supermarket for about 5 years after graduating. I was spending 7 months in the supermarket, 5 months in Bosnia, 8 months in the supermarket. And everyone was like, when are you getting a real job? Still not got a real job, but anyway.
Any other final questions or comments?
One final comment.
It's a quick little silly question for Chris, but do you have a favorite Bosnian food? Because I'm really hungry right now thinking about cevape.
I think everyone is hungry after the film, yes.
Just quickly, I don't want to say I became vegetarian as well 2.5 years ago. And cevape was my staple diet whenever I went to Bosnia. And I was there in November and it was really tough being in Bajrovic and just smelling. And I nearly cracked, but I've got over my addiction. I'm clean now, yeah. But that was the most difficult thing. Giving up meat's easy, but the cevape for me was... Because it's also, I know very little of the language. I know enough to kind of order a beer and have a cevape one day. And dare I say, maybe a burek the next. And that's what I've done for 5 years.
I think you can get really good cheese pie. Yeah. Sirnica.
Maybe I just want to also quickly give Chris also a chance, because I think Balkan Journey is an interesting project, and it's really it takes the form of an exhibition, but it's also a book of photography and essays. Can you tell us a little bit? There's also a website. I want to give you a chance, because I found it quite intriguing and interesting.
So I haven't done much film work because I've been focused on photography. Photography is what I primarily do. But I had this whole record of images going right back to Pakrac in Croatia, 1996, and then through Sarajevo, 97, all the way through to 2019. And the last time I was in Sarajevo was documenting the migrant crisis as well, which I found just very surreal. And Sarajevo's changed dramatically since 96. The first few years I was there, nothing seemed to change, and then everything kind of changed. So I had this collection of images and stories, and the young people who I taught photography, I went back and visited them in 2018 and documented their stories. And put it all together as this Balkan Journey book of photographs and essays, which is translated into Bosnian as well, because this was the other problem I found with a lot of things about Bosnia is a lot of foreign journalists and photographers do work about it, but it's not accessible to Bosnians, because A, it's not in Bosnian, or B, it's an expensive coffee table photography book full of stories about their city and their struggle. And it's about documenting peace as well. So Balkan Journey is the website, which is in Bosnian as well, which contains all the content. So it's just to try and make it as accessible as possible. But I guess my sales pitch is there's not many books left, and once it goes, it goes. But you can order them on balkanjourney.com. Yes. Thanks for that plug. You could be my agent. I need an agent.
Let's talk after the show over a beer.
Well, thank you all. This has been a wonderful opening night. Please come back, continue supporting the festival. It's been wonderful to see you. Hopefully we can socialize and continue these conversations. We really appreciate all your support. And let's give another round of applause to our amazing guests.